Hi, I am Geher from the State University of New York at New Paltz. I work as founding director of evolutionary studies and as professor of psychology. And today I will be talking about the concept of positive evolutionary psychology. So positive evolutionary psychology, which is covered in a recent book of mine that I co-authored with Nicole Wedberg, an alum from SUNY New Paltz, is all about how we can use Darwin's big ideas and help make the world for people a better place. How can we give people richer lives, or ideas, tools, and skills needed to live richer lives based on what we understand about human evolution and evolutionary psychology? One of the core ideas in evolutionary psychology is what we call evolutionary mismatch. Evolutionary mismatch is the idea that under some conditions, an organism exists in conditions now, current conditions, which are in important ways mismatched from the ancestral conditions that surrounded the evolution of that organism. And when you get evolutionary mismatch, you often get problems that are hard for you to think about unless you have this understanding of evolution and evolutionary mismatch. A classic example in humans of evolutionary mismatch has to do with the scale of our society. Human evolution has been going on for hundreds of thousands or millions of years, depending how you define it. The Australopiths go back over 3 million years. They were really the first hominids. It wasn't until 10,000 years ago that humans developed agriculture, that humans figured out that they could grow their own food, raise it right there, and once you could grow your own food, you could create a village, you could create a city, you could stay put. And that's what civilization is. So that was the Neolithic revolution. In evolutionary timescale, that is very recent. 10,000 years is considered a very short time relative to the entirety of the human evolutionary experience. So what was life like before civilization? Before civilization, we were all nomads. You had to be a nomad. Every ancestor you had who existed before 10,000 years ago led a nomadic lifestyle. In a nomadic group or a nomadic clan, there's a lot of things that are very different than modern conditions. In modern conditions, you might work at SUNY New Paltz, where you have 1,000 employees, 8,000 students in a town of 10,000 people, and these days that's called a small school and a small community. Under ancestral conditions, that would be way bigger than any nomadic group ever would have been. Nomadic groups typically were capped at about 150 for very practical reasons. If every couple of weeks you need to pick up everyone, including the kids, including the grandparents, including every single item that you own, and move it 20 miles over the mountains because that's where the food is, you can't do that with 10,000 people. You can't do that with 1 million people. 150 was about the cap. And so for that reason, humans evolved anticipating these small-scale kinds of societies. In addition to being capped at about 150, here's two other important features of a nomadic clan. A, you're related to a lot of the individuals in that group. So you're surrounded by kin members. And kin, from an evolutionary perspective, have a genetic interest in you. So there's reason to think it's good to be surrounded by kin members. Secondly, in a clan, you were typically surrounded by other people with whom you had long-standing social interactions, with whom you've interacted thousands and thousands of times, and you've developed bonds of trust and understanding in those relationships until one of you dies. So that's who you were surrounded with. These days, you can walk from Port Authority to Grand Central Station on 42nd Street, see thousands of strangers that you've never seen before, that you've never seen, that you'll never see again. That is an evolutionary mismatch. Our minds did not evolve to encounter that kind of social ecosystem. So our minds really evolved for these small-scale social ecological conditions. And under these kinds of conditions, things like transgressions and betrayals within a small-scale group were going to be really problematic. And so one of the things that we address in our research on positive evolutionary psychology is what we call the 4 horsemen of the human moral experience. Given that our minds evolve for small-scale living and small-scale conditions, what is the psychology that we have surrounding when someone steps out, when someone betrays someone else, when someone transgresses or trespasses against someone else. So the four horsemen of the human moral experience, based on our model, based on this evolutionary reasoning, starts with some kind of betrayal. So there's a betrayal that someone transgresses or betrays someone else in the community. That's going to be followed by outrage. So outrage is literally rage expressed outward. It's not just anger, but it's anger with finger pointing. It's anger kind of saying, hey, look, this person who's in our community just screwed me over and could do the same to anyone else and to your family. So there's a real public component to outrage. Outrage then, the third horse in the four horsemen model, can be followed by various emotional states, but it might be followed by guilt. And if outrage is followed by genuine guilt, genuine apologetic behavior, genuine reparations, then the final horse in the four horsemen model then becomes forgiveness. So forgiveness really needs to follow only from expressions of genuine guilt and reparations, which again is followed by absolute outrage, which ultimately started by a betrayal. And understanding this model of how forgiveness can be understood from an evolutionary perspective really needs to be understood given the fact that humans evolved in small-scale societies where you're going to be dealing with the same individuals over and over again for extended amounts of time. So that's the four horsemen of the human moral experience based on the concept of positive evolutionary psychology. I'm Geher from the State University of New York at New Paltz.